who's a member of the Disciples of Bolas. You can see there from his fabulous hoodie.
Sick shirt.
And then Todd Stevens, who is 10th on our leaderboard, who is on Cullis Eldrazi. He doesn't have a hoodie, but he is better dressed than just about anybody else here.
He's handsome enough. He doesn't need the hoodie. He's got the tie.
He did actually have an article that went up on our website last week.
Yeah, I know that last year he kind of got into the race for the Player Championship a little late in the year, but he got dedicated real fast, and he made some big moves. So he's carrying that on to this year also.
So it looks like John Taylor mulliganed to 6 to start the game, and he's led on Mountain and Grim Lavamancer. Todd does have an Eldrazi Temple. It's going to power out a 2/2 Endless One. But John is going to go ahead and use his Arid Mesa, go down to 19, find a basic Mountain here. Now, if he has a 1-mana spell, he can use that to get some damage in on Todd and then use the Grim Lavamancer to take care of that Endless One. I wonder if it might have been better for Todd just to hold on to the Endless One rather than deploy it as a 2/2 against an active Grim Lavamancer.
Yeah, there's certainly a little bit of tension with Endless One. We've seen a lot of games, whether it's Modern or now Legacy, where if you play the Endless One early, it can sometimes not have much relevance on the game, but you do want to use tempo to your advantage. So one thing I want to point out, though, is this Eidolon of the Great Revel is pretty interesting because it's going to deal a lot more damage to John Taylor than it is to Todd Stevens. Todd Stevens has a fair number of creatures that cost 4 or 5 mana, whereas John Taylor, he only has 1 card in Fire Blast that will not trigger his Eidolon. So John Taylor's kind of on a little bit of a suicidal game plan. He's saying, we're both dying.
So John is going to just go with the Mountain and that Eidolon of the Great Revel. Todd does have a City of Traders and a Thought-Knot Seer, and that's going to snag a Price of Progress out of his hand, leaving John with just 2 lands, and that is going to be huge. That Price of Progress was poised to do a lot of damage to Todd.
Yeah, Price of Progress is going to be a real haymaker. The other thing that's a little troublesome is John Taylor's hand is just not very good. Was left with just 2 lands. Hopefully he drew something good here. His draw would be good if his opponent had a Thorn of Amethyst, because John is flooded out and would be able to interact with it well. But Todd Stevens' hand being, as it is, John's not really set up to fight it or race it.
So John's just going to go ahead and send that Eidolon of the Great Revel into attack. I imagine he's hoping that Todd blocks. That way he can use the Grim Lavamancer to finish off that Thought-Knot Seer. But being a 4/4, John is going to be hard-pressed to actually handle that creature. So Todd's just going to take the damage, fall down to 18, and I imagine he's just going to try and race here.
Yeah, it's a little tricky, though, because he is not going to win the race as the board stands.
So John is just going to play Scalding Tarn, pass the turn back to Todd. Looks like he picked up a copy of Eldrazi Mimic. He does have some Matter Reshapers in his hand, which would trigger on that Eidolon of the Great Revel. So let's see how he decides to play this turn.
So I'm going to digress for just one moment, but online this past week, my opponent played 2 Eldrazi Mimics off Ivugan, and I got to Forked Bolt them in Legacy. That was a goulet.
So John's just going to go ahead and use his Scalding Tarn to find a land, cash in those 2 cards in his graveyard with his Grim Lavamancer, get rid of that Endless One. But we have another one coming down on the battlefield as a 4/4. It's not going to trigger off that Eidolon of the Great Revel.
Nope. So I'm surprised Todd Stevens didn't just make it a 5/5. Doesn't he have another land drop this turn?
He does have a Cavern, but it looks like he's holding on to it. He doesn't want to get rid of his City of Traders just yet.
I guess that kind of makes sense. The uncounterability isn't particularly important. He just wants access to 4 mana. He would lose a mana if he played the Cavern. So and with John Taylor's life total being a number that's divisible by 4, having a 5/5 instead of a 4/4 doesn't even really make a difference.
So John's just going to play a Mountain. He is at 12, and it looks like he picked up a copy of Fire Blast for the turn. So he might be able to make something happen here. He can get rid of one of those 4/4s. And that Fire Blast would put 3 cards into the graveyard, which would make it pretty stocked for that Grim Lavamancer. But he's still in a losing position if he's using a Fire Blast on a creature.
Yeah, I think those cards are actually already exiled because he used them on the previous Endless One.
Yeah, all of those cards are exiled, but Fire Blast itself would put 3 cards into the graveyard.
2 creatures, yeah, absolutely right.
So it looks like John is going to start out with a 1-mana spell, which is a Goblin Guide. Takes 2 damage from his own Eidolon, falls to 10.
So he could attack with both of his creatures, and if Todd blocks one of them, he could actually clear Todd's board by fire blasting the Endless One and then finishing off fire blasting the Thought-Knot Seer and finishing off the Endless One with Grim Lavamancer. It looks like he's just going to play defense.
He even would draw a card off of that Endless, off the Thought-Knot Seer dying, but he's just going to pass back to Todd. Todd's going to pick up another copy of City of Traders, and let's see how he decides to play this turn. I have to imagine he's just going to push his advantage, try and get John to use as many resources as he can to stop the current onslaught of creatures, and then go from there. But it looks like there's a copy of Endbringer in his hand.
He could play that this turn. He would lose one of his City of Traders, but adding a 5/5 to the board is a huge monster, and the activated abilities on that card are quite good also. For those of you who are not familiar, it untaps during your opponent's turn. You're able to tap it to deal damage to a creature or a player. You can tap it to draw a card. You can tap it so that something can attack or block. So it's something that can generate a lot of value if you can get it on the board early, almost like a Planeswalker.
It's got a lot of text.
It does have a lot of text. It really does a lot.
And it's a 5/5.
It is a 5/5. It doesn't die to Fire Blast. It's going to take multiple burn spells. And the best way for Todd to win is to get enough pressure on the board so that John has to use his burn spells on Todd's creatures. And Todd's creatures are almost all going to require 2 burn spells to get taken care of. So as soon as Todd starts doing that, essentially that's a form of card advantage that he's going to be able to use to, win.
So to start things off, Todd is just going to go ahead and put his creatures into the red zone. John's deciding how he wants to block.
The Sacrificial Goblin Guide.
Yep, so he's going to go ahead and Fire Blast the Endbringer.
And he wants to do this before combat damage, just so that he doesn't take any damage, obviously.
Yeah, the Endless One. And then Thought-Knot Seer is going to die. John's going to draw a card off the Thought-Knot Seer dying. It's going to leave him with an Eidolon of the Great Revel.
And this is perfect, too, because now John, he still has 2 cards in his graveyard for the next Grim Lavamancer trigger, but it's not going to be quite enough for this Endbringer. If he does draw something like a Lightning Bolt, though, he can take care of it, which is pretty amazing.
So we've got an Endbringer on Todd Stevens' side. John Taylor just drew a card for his turn. He did draw a Chain Lightning, so he's going to be able to kill that Endbringer.
Yeah.
But he's going to go down to 8 in the process.
So it's pretty interesting that John Taylor decided to block with the Goblin Guide instead of the Eidolon of the Great Revel. I think part of the reason he wanted to do that was because Todd had been missing land drops, and if he was going to start attacking with the Goblin Guide, he would have been potentially feeding Todd extra land drops, which he didn't want to do. Ooh. But this Eidolon is quite the double-edged sword.
And it looks like Todd just picked up a copy of Eye of Ugin, and he has a bunch of Matter Reshapers in his hand. So he is going to take some damage from that Eidolon, but he is going to be able to put a lot of them onto the battlefield.
Yeah, and Todd's life total is high enough where he can afford to take some damage so long as it means that he's going to get onto the board in a big way. And the Matter Reshapers are something that John Taylor's going to have a pretty hard time dealing with, although they are 3/2, so the Grim Lavamancers will have some work to do, but it's going to be able to get the job done over time.
So Todd's going to go ahead and take some damage down to 12, and then down to 10 from this Eldrazi Mimic that's going to be free, and pass the turn back to John
And
Taylor.
So we saw Eye of Ugin essentially generate 6 mana that turn.
That's a good card, right?
That's pretty decent, I'd say.
So he passes back to John, who's on 8 life. He does have that Eidolon on the battlefield.
And you can really see how if John is trying to fight Todd's creatures, he's just going to run out of gas. Things were off to a bad start for him considering how many lands he drew, but just looking at the cards and how they interact with each other, I think it's pretty apparent that John Taylor, he really wants to be in a racing scenario, not in a scenario where he's trying to control what Todd's doing.
Especially with, once you find an Eye of Ugin, just being able to generate so much mana out of it.
Yeah.
It's going to be able to put you ahead when you're trying to fight that attrition war. So John's just going to play a Bloodstained Mire. Let's see what he does here. It's like he's passing back to Todd, and Todd's just going to start attacking.
So no creature to be played to make the Eldrazi Mimic bigger, which is pretty notable.
This is currently a lethal attack, so John does have to do something.
Yeah, I'm sure John would like an opportunity to get rid of his Eidolon since it's killing him faster than it is killing Todd. The Eldrazi Mimic seems like a pretty good creature to trade with because it can potentially be bigger later on, and trading with the Matter Reshaper is kind of a bad proposition because it's just going to recycle into another card. That said, the Matter Reshapers are a little bit more power this turn.
Wow, so it looks like John's just going to go down to 2.
I'm surprised he didn't crack his fetch land and shoot down one of the Matter Shapers. There are 3/2s, right?
They are 3/2s.
Yep.
So he's going up top, putting Todd down to 8. So I guess he's...
Not sure what he could draw. He only has 1 card in his hand?
He does.
I guess a Fire Blast off the top. No, that wouldn't do it.
Yeah, he would have had to have a Fire Blast and another burn spell. So he's going to go down to 1 here. And so if he has...
Price of Progress is something that he could draw to win this game. That would be quite impressive. There'd also be a reason to crack your fetch land before you cast it.
Yeah.
You'll kill both of us.
All right, Lava Spike is going up top, putting Todd Stevens down to 5.
So
I guess if he has another burn spell here.
Yeah, if he has another burn spell, that's it. Wow.
Just exactly.
And that is it.
Wow.
Jeez.
Exactly. It's from
John,
10.
That is
one card.
Extremely impressive. John
I got
Taylor,
1 card. You're at 10. I have a Lavamancer. Now you're dead.
Wow. John Taylor, he had a kind of a bad draw. His Eidolon did a lot of damage to him. He had to sacrifice 2 lands pretty early on to cast Fire Blast. He was flooding out, which is bad, but at least he had the fuel for Fire Blast and still be able to function. And he won that game with no more cards in hand at 1 life, and that is quite the masterful performance.
Wow. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the sideboards while our players start to sideboard
I thought he
here.
was dead. I still can't believe he won that.
Yeah. Jeez. All right. So Todd Stevens has 2 Warping Whale, 2 Crucible of Worlds, 3 copies of Tormod's Crypt, 3 Winter Orb, 2 Ratchet Bomb, 2 Dismember, and a Wormcoil Engine. What do you think he's going to do here?
So I think the best cards to bring in are going to be the Ratchet Bomb and the Wormcoil Engine. Wormcoil Engine in particular is pretty nice against a burn deck. Ratchet Bomb, it doesn't do a whole lot. The burn decks usually don't have that many permanents, but they do have a couple. And you can generally assume that the burn deck is going to have Ensnaring Bridges. When I play Temur Delver, I have 1 Ancient Grudge in my sideboard, and I always bring it in against burn opponents, even if I haven't seen Ensnaring Bridge. So I think those are pretty reasonable. I don't think he would bring in Winter Orb, as I don't think that the burn deck really needs that much mana to operate, although depending on if Todd Stevens just has some cards that he thinks are bad and wants to take out, maybe that would be an option.
On John's side, we've got 4 Pyrostatic Pillar, 4 Exquisite Firecraft, 3 Ensnaring Bridge, 3 Smash to Smithereens, and a Grim Lavamancer. What do you think is going to go on here?
So I think the cards that he's definitely going to bring in are Ensnaring Bridge. Depending on how well he knows Todd Stevens' deck, Smash to Smithereens can also be quite the good card. I think that John will bring in Smash to Smithereens. This Colorless Eldrazi deck is essentially based off of a mono artifact deck. And then depending on how much fighting on the ground John Taylor thinks he's going to be doing, Grim Lavamancer can also be quite good. So I think he's going to be bringing in those cards.
Sounds reasonable. So this matchup has been pretty interesting so far. That was a very exciting game. I didn't think that John was going to pull it out. So while they finish up their sideboarding, I do want to talk about the StarCityGames.com state and provincial championships that are coming up. April 23rd through the 24th, 2016. There are 62 locations. Saturday is going to be standard. Sunday is going to be modern. That's our official hashtag SCG States. We're going to have 2 limited edition prints that will be available for the state and provincial championships.
Wow, those are nice.
Yeah.
Is that like a railroad running through the one on the left?
That is.
Sick.
And those are going to be available, again, that limited edition prints. It's going to be pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's what makes them so valuable.
And here we've got the top 8 playmats and pins. So we have Past City and Future City. are the art for them. One is going to be for standard.
I get it.
One is going to be for modern.
Over time, a canal turns into a railroad.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
It's actually pretty sweet. And then if you win the whole shebang, you get a champion playmat and a medal. And that medal is going to be engraved with the date and your state.
Getting that bling.
Yeah.
Yeah, super sweet. I love all the things that Star City does. All the random stuff that you can get is always so cool, you know?
And then this is new. There are going to be door prizes at each event. There's going to be a customized, oversized token for each event. So if you're in Alabama, there's going to be an Alabama token. Wyoming, a Wyoming token. You know, if you're in Hawaii, there's going to be a Hawaii token.
Dude, sick.
So that's really awesome.
Yeah, these things are really fun. I like all the, these are like collector's items, you know?
They really are.
It's like, I know when I was a little kid, I had the baseball card collection. Now it's like, what do I do with that stuff anymore? But this stuff is cool. I can say, I got this at States. This is like linked to an experience I had in my life.
So we're here for Game 2, Todd Stevens on colorless Eldrazi against John Taylor on burn. Todd has the Eye of Ugin. He's going to lead off with an Eldrazi Mimic on turn 1.
And look at Todd. He's not even tapping his lands.
No,
Doesn't he know that that's what you're supposed to do?
Cards on the battlefield.
So it'll be interesting to see how much of John's burn goes at Todd's creatures and how much goes at Todd's face.
One thing that stood out to me last game was Grim Lavamancer did a lot of work.
Yeah, Grim Lavamancer did.
Now, Todd does have some answers to that in Warping Whale and Dismember. Dismember, of course, being the less choiceful option.
Yeah.
But he just didn't see any Warping Whales. John Taylor's just going to attack with the Goblin Guide. He's going to see a Chalice of the Void on Todd Stevens' side. Todd does have a copy of Ancient Tomb in his hand, so he is going to be able to deploy that Chalice on 1 next turn if he decides to.
I have to imagine that that's basically a windmill slam for Tom. John, he can have some artifact removal, but playing Chalice on 1 is one of the easiest ways to lock a burn deck out of the game and just make it so that 3/4 of his draws are uncastable.
So it looks like he's going to cash in his Eldrazi Mimic, blocking the Goblin Guide from John Taylor. And I really like that block.
Yeah.
He's going to get the board clear. He's going to take a couple of damage from the Ancient Tomb, get that Chalice on the battlefield for 1, and he does have a copy of Reality Smasher that gets to come down next turn. Oh, and he even has an Urborg, so he can make it so he doesn't take any damage from his Ancient Tombs if he doesn't need to.
Yeah, very, very impressive curve from Todd. After seeing the Chalice, he knew that all he had to do was trade with the Eldrazi Mimic, preserve his life total, and he's guaranteed to win a longer game.
Oh, so it looks like he's not going to play the Reality Smasher. Or maybe it isn't a Reality Smasher and I just can't see the card. So there's a Thorn of Amethyst and a Matter Reshaper.
I wonder if this is going to be smashed to smithereens. That would be pretty impressive.
So John is going to go ahead and use his Wooded Foothills, go down to 19. I imagine this is in response to the Thorn of Amethyst?
I believe it is. And so Todd Stevens, he's not making the biggest play, but he is able to get the most mana out of his Eye of Ugin by casting multiple spells. So that's pretty cool.
So we're going to see Searing Blaze with the landfall.
Oh, that's unfortunate. A second Eye of Urborg. There is a cost that you pay on these legendary lands.
But that means it was Searing Blaze and not Smash the Smithereens.
Yeah.
So we still have this Chalice on the battlefield.
Indeed.
Even though Todd is at 13, he's still sitting in good shape. John's going to go ahead and draw for the turn, and let's see what he can put together.
You know, a card like Price of Progress, though, is still looking pretty good. Price of Progress, Fire Blast. John Taylor still has a lot of ways to push through damage, depending on what he draws. He could just draw a bunch of 1-mana burn spells, but he does have some other cards that are quite good.
Looks like we've got an Eldrazi Mimic from Todd Stevens. John Taylor's going to fire off a Lightning Bolt on Todd's end step. You got to keep him honest. Make sure he utilizes that Chalice of the Void trigger.
Yep, it is Todd's trigger to remember. John's at the point where he may be in discard to hand size territory, so you just kind of want to fire that stuff off. You have nothing to lose, essentially.
So Todd Stevens isn't really drawing much, but he's just putting these non-basic lands onto the battlefield when he doesn't really need to, instead of keeping them back in his hand to try and buffer himself against a price of progress. That could end up being a misstep as we move forward in this game.
Yeah, I think the main reason he's trying to do is because if he hits one more land drop, he can play Reality Smasher without taking any damage off his Ancient Tombs. So I think that's the reason he's doing it, but it is certainly treacherous. I mean, right now, a price of progress.
He already has an Eye of Ugin, so it only costs 3 mana, and the Eye taps for mana.
Wow. Well, punked out of the game.
Todd's going to go to 1.
This could be it. Yeah,
that's unfortunate.
I have to imagine that John is going to finish the game off right here.
It's another price.
Another price. Jeez. So I guess Todd didn't have a Reality Smasher in hand. It seemed like his...
Yeah, it looks like it was a Warping Well.
Yeah, it seemed like his draw just had kind of flooded out. I guess maybe he was playing those lands so that he could activate Eye of Ugin. If he activates and gets Wormcoil Engine, that's really good.
It's true.
So maybe it is fine for Todd.